first and foremost, I want to get to our special guest, a highly respected football mind, a ball knower, your analyst, favorite analyst, the founder of Sharp Football Analysis. It's Warren Sharp joined the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh,
I'm really excited about this upcoming season for you guys. Chance at hopefully ending it a little bit better than 2024. But look, the playoffs, you just got to get into the tournament the best way possible. Ideally, securing the #1 overall seed to get that first round bye. Anything happens when you get there, and obviously, we've seen a lot of teams have success and get there frequently, such as like the San Francisco 49ers, and just struggled to get over that hump. So it's steps in the right direction for you guys. I know that you're disappointed in the way last year ended, but I think that there are potentially good things ahead for you guys in 2025.
And Warren, I appreciate you joining us, and respect the stash, by the way. That is an impressive mustache. And we're talking about the Detroit Lions, obviously, and a big key to them winning 15 games last year was playing Jacksonville and Tennessee in kind of this weaker schedule. And next year they have a gauntlet when you look at going on the road in Philly, on the road in Baltimore, on the road in Kansas City. How much does that factor into maybe, like, we don't expect them to get the #1 seed in the NFC? Should Lions fans still have that expectation even with the gauntlet of the season they have before them?
So it's interesting. You guys have the third most difficult schedule of opponents, but you have one of the easiest schedules that I've ever seen from a rest advantage perspective. And I've got the metrics there. We can discuss that. It's a great schedule from a rest perspective. I have never seen before where a team plays 7 more games with extra rest than with less rest. And that's what you guys have this year. The most I've seen since 1990, because I've been studying it since 1990, digging back into the numbers since then, was a team that had 4 more games with rest edge than rest disadvantage. You guys have 7. You guys have 8 total games with a rest edge this year. You guys are going to play 5 teams off of a Monday Night Football game. You have to, with a difficult schedule, you have to make all those little edges count. You have to make all that little extra time of prep, extra time of rest, help your team win these games. And so I think that it's going to be a challenge, and I do agree with you. I think the sights always should be, A, win the division, B, get the #1 seed in the NFC. So you've got that goal. But it's not a realistic expectation to just assume that because it happened last year, it's going to happen this year. Not with the schedule, not with the coaching staff, not with some of that turnover. So it's a new year every season. And I think, first and foremost, you got to go out there and every single week try to win every single game that you play and just let the chips fall where they may. It's going to be easier said than done, though, in 2025.
Yeah, Warren, this is very impressive, this 2025 football preview you have, and there's a lot of detail into it. How long is this typically, like, when do you start this? Because I know you just finished up kind of recently. This is
I've got a copy of it sitting over here. This is 586 pages is what the print form looks like. And you can buy this over at Amazon. You can buy it up on the website at sharpfootballanalysis.com. And I start writing this in late February, early March. I basically throw the John Madden, you are what your record says you are, out the window because I disagree with that entirely. I think so many factors happen every single year, including lots of luck, whether it's fumble luck or field goal luck or 4th down luck or red zone luck, things along those lines that really define wins and losses, but aren't necessarily a true indicator of how strong your team was. And so I try to look at really how strong your team was, what it lost from last year, what it gained that's going to be new, and then what we can look at from your schedule this upcoming season. So that's why it takes months to do. That's why it's 586 pages. Like I said, it's $29.99 over at Sharp Football Analysis. But for you guys, we'll do it for $1. Anybody who's listening, just go over to Sharp Football Analysis and punch in the code Lions, and you'll get that book for just $1. And I promise you, you won't get better bang for your buck this season in terms of researching, whether you're trying to play fantasy football, you're into sports betting, anything like that. This book will help you out.
That's so awesome.
I appreciate that. I'm sure listeners appreciate that very much too.
Yeah, our listeners are blowing up the chat. They're going over. Make sure you go to Chris, I'm going to send the link, if you could pin the link to the top of the YouTube chat so the listeners can go in there. You talked about how you look at a lot of different factors for the teams and what they added and what they lost. This Lions team suffered some losses in the offseason, both in that interior offensive line when you look at Frank Ragnow retiring and Kevin Zeitler move on, and also the coordinators with Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn both moving on. What would you say is a bigger factor in your analysis between those two losses?
Wow, it's really tough to differentiate the two. I am such a big proponent on coaching, and that's why I spent a lot of my research examining coaching factors and play calling. And if you read the book, you'll see how detailed I get with that aspect of football, because I think it's undervalued. Everybody looks at the players, and I think in the era of last decade to 15 years even, it's shifted further in this direction with the fantasy football era of football. Everybody cares more about the players and the stars and less about the actual coaches who are calling the plays. And that's why you can't differentiate a quarterback from his play caller. They're so intertwined, it's hard to separate the two. You guys have, and there's so many things that Ben Johnson did last season that I wrote about in the book. One of which was his massive increase and shift towards utilizing a lot of play action that was not being utilized back in 2023, that they increased in 2024. And the reason they did that is because Jared Goff was so much better with play action in 2023. Mm-hmm. However, they used just 77 play action dropbacks compared to 155 passes without play action in 2023. And so they really wanted to try to figure out a way to balance it more. So they put Jared Goff under center more. They called a few more run plays. And I'm not even talking about your game script, because in the fourth quarter you could do more of this. I'm talking about even in the first half of games when the game is very much open and the defense doesn't know what's coming. They had Goff under center more, and they utilized very few shotgun snaps, the lowest rate of shotgun snaps of any team in the NFL, so that they could get these play action passes ramped up. And Jared Goff had another phenomenal season utilizing play action last year. It's all the tinkering that Ben Johnson was able to do that to try to give your team any extra edge that he could offensively. And that's the thing that I'm worried about. It's one of the things I'm worried about, obviously, with John Morton being there. Is John Morton going to spend most of his time just simply trying to keep his head above water and try to get on track with getting the calls in correctly and getting the calls in quickly enough and making sure that they're scripting things the right way, that he doesn't have as much focus on the smaller details and the things that were what Ben Johnson stayed up at night thinking about. Ben Johnson knew what he was going to do. He knew how to get the plays in. He knew all the big stuff. He could then spend the time on the small little details that sometimes won or lost games, whereas I'm worried that you're going to not be able to have enough time to get to those things with a brand new play caller. So that is a concern for me. Your line is a big concern as well. I mean, your line obviously is a downgrade from where they were last season. It's inevitable when you lose a center the quality of Frank Ragnow and have younger players starting there on the interior of the offensive line. So it's a matter of keeping Jared Goff comfortable enough so that the passing attack can still execute. It's a matter of having the time so that Goff can get to these play action passes. Because think about it, when the defense is crashing down because they think that it might be a run and it turns into a play action pass, that takes longer behind center for Jared Goff to turn around, to come back and get the ball out to his receiver than a traditional shotgun pass. Mm-hmm. And that means that offensive line, especially in the interior, has to block for a longer period of time, has to win on those pass blocks. And we'll see if they are able to do that. If they're not, my fear is that Jared Goff's going to utilize less play action this year, and the passing attack overall is going to be weaker because of how great he was utilizing play action.
Not often do we have guys that cover the league nationally that can break down the intricacies of what the Detroit Lions got going on. I feel like a lot of times people just throw standard, just on a template stuff out there. I appreciate that from you very, very, very much. I got to ask, I'm looking here on some of the quarterback rankings on here. I know it's not yours. It looks like it's Rich's. Jared Goff 12 on the rankings. Can I ask why that is in your opinion?
I think it's probably because the feeling is that this is a machine, right? You've got great running backs, you've got solid receivers, you got that includes your tight end, and you've had a solid offensive line. If you look at our rankings for the book, and again, there's multiple writers who write for me who contribute to the rankings that we use. And from a positional ranking perspective, the fantasy rankings where Rich put Goff 12th overall, that was for fantasy perspective in terms of what Jared Goff is going to deliver this year. That being said, we have your quarterback room ranked 11th overall this year. We have your O-line ranked 3rd, your running backs ranked 1st, and your receiving core ranked 1st. So it's how much is that quarterback actually being elevated by the other pieces of the offense coupled with the play calling versus how much does Goff elevate an offense himself just by being Jared Goff? And it's really hard. I mentioned before separating Jared Goff from his play caller. It's the same way for every single quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. You can't separate Patrick Mahomes from Andy Reid. Patrick Mahomes is just blessed by the fact that he's got Andy Reid calling plays for him, and we don't have to think about the alternative. What if Andy Reid was gone and Patrick Mahomes was getting play calls from Matt Nagy? Let's pretend. How good would that look? Probably not nearly as good as if it was Andy Reid. So the question then becomes, Jared Goff has been able to work with Sean McVay. Jared Goff has been able to work with Ben Johnson. That's the two spots where Jared Goff has looked the best. What's it going to look like with a new offensive play caller that's obviously not to the same caliber of those other two? So it'll be interesting to see how Jared Goff looks this year, how comfortable he feels this year. Obviously, the passing attack, from what it was able to deliver and its efficiency last year, far above, ranking number 11. But a lot of help from the pieces around him and the play calling. Now we might be able to separate out a little bit Jared Goff from this prior play calling. How does he perform this year with somebody else? And if he is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league from an efficiency perspective and delivering a very high ceiling for the Lions passing attack this year, then I think it's time to really give him the credit that he's owed. I'm not suggesting that he's a bad quarterback or even a mediocre quarterback. I'm simply saying that it's hard to separate him from the rest of this offense or his play calling, and this year will be a true test for him.
I agree, and a lot of the hot button topics, we broadcast here on the internet, and so we see a lot of live reaction, a lot of banter from rival fan bases. The wide receiver rankings, I feel like it's a lot more like, what's your flavor? Do you like the freak athlete that could run alongside line, jump up and get it, or do you like a more productive slot guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown? Being that you break down these analytics so often, what is it that you see is more valuable to a football organization?
Well, I think right now, the way that defenses are playing, what you need is consistency, because defenses have taken away explosive to a very large degree. I'll throw out these numbers. I wrote about this a little while ago, so these are off the top of my head. I think these are correct. 26% of touchdowns had been scored from outside of the red zone like 3+ years ago. But over the last couple years, there's only been 21% of all touchdowns scored from outside of the red zones. The defensive too high shells and the way that they're playing coverage is limiting explosive plays and forcing you to be more consistent, driving the football closer and closer to the goal line before you score touchdowns. Drives have more plays, drives have to take more yards, drives have to convert more on third downs. And so as a result, having the players that are going to be able to, it's also easier. I actually just tweeted about this today, posted, whatever you call it now, about how wide receiver ones, it's easier to get them the football. Like back in the day when there was a lot more man coverage, you needed that tall stud wide receiver one with speed to get downfield separation and to be able to win contested catches and just to be that obvious stud. Nowadays, passes have less air yards. They're thrown closer to the line of scrimmage. You're moving your number one receiver more frequently into the slot because it's easier to get the ball to a slot receiver than it is to a guy on the outside. And so as a result, it's just easier to get the ball in the hands of a number one receiver. You don't need to have those historical prototypical Calvin Johnson skill set to dominate as a receiver. Now, I'm not suggesting a guy like Calvin Johnson wouldn't crush in 2025 in the NFL. I'm simply saying that it's easier to have a receiver with more dynamic skills, but less of a pure historical wide receiver one prototype So as a result, and you definitely want the speed of Jameson Williams to try to get those occasional explosives, but it's great to have a receiver like a Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's going to be there on time where he needs to be and is extremely reliable from a catch rate perspective.
And that's what I wanted to ask, Warren. I'm looking at your book right now, by the way. We have the link pinned to the top of the chat. Make sure you go there and purchase yours yourself. Promo code Lions. You have the Lions receivers ranked as number 1, as you said. And that I expect a massive leap from Jameson Williams next year, especially adding Johnny Morton, who likes to take more explosive shots down the field. Is that something that you're foreseeing as well with him to take that kind of leap into, I'm talking approaching all-pro stuff? I think he could go first-team all-pro truly with the explosiveness that he has.
He's got the skill set, number 1. And number 2, you guys inevitably are not going to be winning as many games as you did last year. You're not going to be leading late in games as often, and thus you're going to need to throw the football more frequently. And that's where he can get those counting stats, right? From an efficiency perspective, that's great, but he's not going to get that all-pro level and the title if he's not getting the counting stats, right? The all the yards and all the catches and all the touchdowns, and he's going to be more likely to get those when you're in more competitive games, which I think that is going to be the case, unfortunately, for you guys this season. I mean, what we are able to do is we're able to look at incompletions and determine whether those incompletions were wide receivers' fault or quarterback's fault in terms of accuracy, at least. And you guys ranked best in the NFL in receiver error. That includes dropped passes. That includes passes that should have been caught, but you failed to get 2 feet down when you could have gotten 2 feet down. That includes passes that you hit the ground and bobbled the ball and it came out and is ruled incomplete, but it should have been a catch. You guys had the number 1 best receiver room in that regard last year. You also ranked number 1 in lowest drop rate, which is obviously very closely correlated, and number 1 in on-target catch rate. So if you can maintain that level of consistency in 2025, that's going to go a long way, because you are going to need to throw the football more, and thus you need those receivers to continue to be reliable outlets for Jared Goff in this passing attack. But in terms of Jameson Williams specifically, I absolutely agree. He is super fun to watch. He's super fun to see the ball in his hands, and I'm just very curious how much John Morton is going to do creatively with him, because we saw that a ton last year and in the prior years when he was able to get in there and with Ben Johnson, and we'll see how that translates into just creatively figuring out any way possible to get the get the ball into Jameson Williams' hands.
Warren, I've always had this theory. I've been a big cap nerd. I'm a big fan of general managers, the way they manage the cap and stuff like that. And I've kind of got my own theory. It's called the 12% rule. And typically, if a quarterback's taking more than 12% of your cap space, your team is less likely to win Super Bowls. I think the guys only break that have been Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, and I believe Peyton Manning. Three of the greatest of all time to ever play the game. I know you're locked in with the analytics and stuff like that. Do you get into the cap, and where are you at with that, paying these quarterbacks almost too much sometimes to fill out the team?
I've done all that research. It's been a couple of years since I sat down and went through it to update it, but absolutely was fully on board with all of that when I last did that research, in terms of being able to successfully win games and setting your team up to win games, because as we know, there's 53 players on the roster. The general manager has to build that out. There has to be some levels of depth to overcome injuries, but nowadays, my thought is still close to being accurate with that, but I've changed my, synopsis. What I believe now is, as long as your quarterback is delivering production and efficiency in excess of what you're paying him, I feel like at that point, it's okay. In other words, a lot of rookie quarterbacks on those rookie deals are such great values, and that's where you see a lot of these teams like your Jaden Daniels with the Commanders have playoff runs or have success, because they're paying peanuts comparatively to what a quarterback is actually delivering. The alternative is you got a guy like Kirk Cousins, who's one of the highest paid quarterbacks, or Dak Prescott, is the highest paid player in the NFL on an average basis. And when those guys are being paid as they are, and they're still solid quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins not as much, but if they're not delivering in excess of what you're paying them from an efficiency perspective, that's hurting your team by having to pay them at that rate. And so like a guy like Patrick Mahomes, or a couple of the other names you mentioned, Brady and Peyton Manning, I think that there are others around the league who you can still afford to pay this guy because he's delivering such value to you. I don't believe that you can be, however, pay a quarterback to a high degree, have him give you just above average production, and then be a run first team. You need that efficiency that quarterback is delivering. And the reason that you're paying him is because he's going to deliver that for you. And that's why when you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes, you pass the ball a ton. When you have a guy like Tom Brady, you pass the ball a ton. And when you have, because we know passing offers more upside than does rushing. From an EPA per play perspective, it is more efficient. Now, that's changing a little bit because defenses are playing that too high shell, and run plays are having a little bit better efficiency, and more teams are running the football more frequently, and you have to be able to come out and run the ball when defenses are playing softer to try to prevent passes. And so there is a slight shift, but I still believe you can have success even if you're paying your quarterback with the caps rising overall, as long as that quarterback is delivering really exceptional production. So I've softened my stance, I guess you could say, a little bit, but I still, generally speaking, believe in you. I don't know if it's 12% or what the percentage is any longer, but I still believe most of that excess production is going to come from quarterbacks on those rookie deals, or the absolute elite quarterbacks around the NFL. And then otherwise, for many of these other quarterbacks that are in that next tier, like your Kyler Murray, like your Dak Prescott, like your Kirk Cousins, you are overpaying them, and it is hurting your team when you're doing that.
And Warren, I just want to ask you one more thing before we get you out of here, and really appreciate so much having your knowledge and everything on the show. It's been so awesome. And again, the link is pinned to the top of the chat. Everybody go use the promo code LIONS and get yourself a copy of his newest book for the 2025 season. And looking at it right here, this is just something that stood out to me while I was scrolling through, just skimming it in my first look. The Lions in the past 2 years have the number 3 pressure rating in the NFL, but they are 26th in sack rate, and you detailed that the rest of the top 6 are all within the top of 11 of sack rating. Is this just an anomaly? Can the Lions not close when they finally get to the quarterback, or how do they fix something like that?
Blitz.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is going to be, now that you don't have your old defensive coordinator there, maybe that helps things, because for the past couple of years, it's just been the same story over and over again. It's that you guys are getting pressure, but you're not getting home and making those sacks. And I wrote about this a lot in my 2024 football preview entering last season, about how there was a coaching emphasis and an emphasis from inside of the building of how they needed to make that pay off in 2024. And yet in 2024, once again, it was more of the same. We're getting pressure with our defense, but we're not actually getting home. Now, of course, Aiden Hutchinson being healthy may help in that regard, obviously. But if you look at, I shared a little bit further down that same page, the data the last 3 years, when you get pressure but you don't get a sack, your quarterback's EPA drops from plus 0.19 when you're not getting pressure down to minus 0.12. Which is great. That's a big drop. Pressure matters. You don't have to get a sack. Pressure does matter. However, the drop from pressure without a sack to actually recording a sack moves from minus 0.12 EPA per drop back for those quarterbacks to minus 1.66. So it's just worlds different. It's massive. Sacks are drive killers. When you take a sack on a drive, you are reducing your ability to score points on that drive by, I want to say, close to half. You're reducing your touchdown rate by like a factor of 3 when you take a sack on a drive. So getting those sacks rather than just getting pressure is going to be something that still has to be a similar emphasis like it was last year in the offseason. But hopefully with a new coordinator there, you're going to find some more positive ways to actually get to the quarterback and get him on the ground. cause some turnovers if possible, sack fumbles or hits when he's throwing the football. And though it's not a sack, it can be intercepted. But for the most part, we need to end those drives and finish those pressures with sacks. And I don't think we could say it's impossible for you guys to improve in that category because you've been so bad. There's only one direction to go. It's up and improve in that category. And I think that it's more likely that that's what happens in 2025 for your defense than for me to assume your guys are going to stay as one of those teams that is a total outlier and just gets pressure but never gets sacked. So I think that's going to be a positive for your defense. Yes, you've got a new coordinator, but you have a improved defense. You have an improved secondary. You guys on that side of the football, though, have to play lights out, though, because you're playing a very difficult schedule of opposing offenses. This is nothing new. Last year, you played the 6th most difficult schedule of opposing offenses. This year, I've got you playing the 5th most difficult schedule of opposing offenses. So your defense is going to be called upon to try to limit scoring, and it's got to play a little bit better, particularly in the secondary. The good part is when you build those leads like your offense is capable of doing, and hopefully that continues with John Morton and despite the interior offensive line, that makes life a little bit easier for the defense because the opposing offense is more predictable. The opposing offense is more desperate. And that allows you to call things a little bit more aggressively, defensively, because you know they're going to be sitting back there passing the football more frequently. And hopefully you guys can step up defensively and help your offense out more.
Warren, I appreciate you so much for your time. Just one more time, if you'd like to give out the website where people can get the book discounted before it's only available for $30.
Yeah, it drops the price from $30 down to $1. Just go to sharp.football or sharpfootballanalysis.com. Either will get you there, and enter the code LIONS. 586 pages of analysis. We talked about the Lions obviously on here. You can research the Packers or the Vikings or any of the other teams in the NFL if you want to. There's 31 other ones over those 586 pages for just $1 heading into the season. I think you're really going to enjoy it.
Warren, I'll be bugging you during the regular season to come back on, man. Unfortunately, right now we got Jason Kabinda waiting from Good Morning Football. Appreciate you for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Warren.
Thank you, guys.